It is the Martha Zoller Show, and I'm very excited for this next hour that we're going to have. It's a very special hour that we're going to be together talking with a number of folks. We've got Anat Sultan Dadon, who is the Consul General for the Southeastern United States here in the United States for Israel. We've got Linda Selig from the White Rose Society, and we've got Dove Wilker, who we don't get enough FaceTime together because we've been friends for a very long time, from the AJC, which is not the newspaper,
correct,
but the American Jewish Committee. Did I get it right?
You got it right.
All right. So we've got these folks here with us today, and we're going to be talking about a number of things. But first, I want each person to just kind of talk about what they do here in their organization. We'll start with Anat.
Sure. So it's great to be with you again, Martha. And I am the Consul General of Israel to the Southeastern United States. Based in Atlanta, we cover 7 Southeastern states, and we are charged with promoting Israel's bilateral relations with the United States in this region in all the different realms: political, economic, cultural, academic, etc.
And you were very instrumental in keeping the light on Keith Siegel, who was from North Carolina,
That's
who was
right.
one of the hostages that was taken on October 7th. And you would not let him be forgotten because, in my view, we didn't talk enough about, as a country, about the American hostages. And you kept that light on.
Thank you. Thank you for giving a platform for that. And we need to still remember that there are still 59 hostages, including Americans, still languishing in captivity in Gaza. And so thank you for using your voice also to remember and to remind others that this really is on all of us.
So Linda Selig is with us today. Tell us about the White Rose Society.
The White Rose Society really grew out of a reaction to the October 7th, the horrors of what happened that day. And we are really, our whole goal is to thank people who are standing with the Jewish community and with Israel. And this is a movement that really is a grassroots movement which came together, and it includes leaders of synagogues, leaders of nonprofit organizations, federations, and foundations. So what grew from a very small beginning has really grown, and we are looking for people who have shown moral courage and are willing to stand on the right side of history and recognize them.
So as you got involved in this, so this was more something you've done after October 7th, but you were a Jewish woman living in Atlanta for many, many years. How did October 7th change the way you interacted with your Jewishness and with how you reacted with other people?
I would say that being part of the Jewish community has been decades. I've served a many...
I mean, Atlanta's very strong.
Exactly. And
Yes.
I have been very, very involved. But something happened on October 7th. And I think for most people I know, whether they were involved or not involved, we looked at ourselves as being Jewish and American in a totally different way. It's sort of like the earth shifted, and we had to figure out how to adjust to that. So I would say everybody in their own way is trying to find a way to make a difference.
So when I was 14, my mom worked for a guy named Gunther Hecht at Riches, and he was Jewish, and obviously his family was Jewish. His parents were not able to get out of Europe for the Holocaust, but they were able to get their children out and get them to the United States. And amazingly, miraculously, their parents did actually survive and get out after the war, but they were separated for a number of years. And so I remember asking him to come and speak to my history class. We were studying World War II, and I introduced him as a German American. And he said, "No, Martha, I'm an American," you know? And then he went on to talk about his experiences. And he was really the first person that I knew that had that kind of history that I knew well. And funny story, we got invited to his children's bar mitzvahs, and I actually had my first mixed drink at a bar mitzvah in Atlanta in about 1974. So anyway, don't do the math of how old I was. But it was just a wonderful experience that I didn't think much about it being different religions. Although I will say that I grew up Lutheran, okay, which is kind of a German-based kind of religion. And there was a transition I noticed as I was growing up between kind of how we talked about Jews in church versus, and it was a more positive, it went from being they were different to they're a part of us. Do you know what I mean?
Yes,
in my growing up time, in how it was preached from the pulpit kind of thing. And so that I remember noticing that because I was one of those kids that noticed everything. And I'm so glad that as an evangelical Christian, which is what I consider myself, that we are there in that place because we're all together. We're all a part of the same religion. We're all part of worshiping the same God. I believe Jesus is the Messiah, and that's the biggest difference between what we believe. But that doesn't mean we can't work together on things. And in fact, we have to.
Absolutely.
We have to. Dove Wilker, I have known you for years, and but tell people about the AJC.
Of course. Well, thank you first, Martha, for having us on today. Always a pleasure to be with you. So American Jewish Committee is a global Jewish advocacy organization, and I represent the Southeastern office. And we work at the intersection of the Jewish and non-Jewish community with diplomats, with elected officials, with religious and ethnic leaders, all to create a better understanding of who the Jewish people are, to disrupt anti-Semitism, and to create support for the state of Israel. And so this past 15 months has been a very busy time for us.
How did it change for you on that day?
Much of what we do as an organization is focused on the external. And after October 7th, we really began to focus a lot more on the internal, right? Sharing information, training our Jewish community members to be better advocates, to be more knowledgeable about the state of Israel, to be more knowledgeable around the state of anti-Semitism. We produce an annual report that speaks about the perception of anti-Semitism, both within the Jewish community and with the non-Jewish community, the general public. And what we have found is that the anxiety of the Jewish community is at an all-time high in recent memory. And it's leading to a change of behaviors. So 56% of American Jews have changed their behavior in the past 12 months out of fear of anti-Semitism. They don't wear things that identify them as Jewish. They don't go to Jewish institutions. They don't want to be at a Jewish event in public because they're worried about what might happen. And for us in the South, it's actually a little bit better. We've been more fortunate about the response from the general public in identifying and calling out anti-Semitism. But nationwide and around the world where we have 15 offices, it's continuing to be a big problem.
Sheryl Sandberg did this wonderful, very hard to watch, but very truthful documentary called Screams Before Silence.
Yeah.
And in the number of interviews she did, I don't think it's in the documentary, but I think it's a number of interviews she did where she was promoting the documentary, where she shared this story of taking a walk with a friend of hers and asking that friend, if need be, will you hide me?
Yeah.
And I thought that was ridiculous, when I first heard it because it first came out. But I have since had one of my Jewish friends that I've had come from the Northeast that has said to me, would you hide me if it comes to that? And she was serious. She was dead serious, okay? And it's an important thing. And I've like I said, I've worn this necklace since somewhere around the 8th, 9th, or 10th of October as soon as I got it. And I've had pretty positive response, almost all positive, even wearing it in New York City. And I will admit to you, I thought about not wearing it while I was in New York City walking around, okay?
That's right.
But then I thought, what kind of person would I be if I didn't, go ahead and wear it? And I initially, I had people would come up to me and they'd like whisper. They go, thank you for doing that. Wow. They would whisper something like that. But I was in the ladies' room at a conference of talk show hosts, and these two women came out and I came out and I'm washing my hands, and they both saw it. And they both identified themselves as being Jewish. So, I'm not going to check them for it. They said they were. And the first one said, oh, thank you for doing that. The other one said, well, what about the Palestinians? And I said, what do you mean, what about the Palestinians? And I said, what happened on October 7th is terrible. And what I don't understand is why the Palestinians are not united with the Israelis to get rid of Hamas. Right. And you and I have shared that thought before. It's a hard bit of work to do. So we're going to take a break. When we come back, the Consul General is going to update us on where we are with the war today, and then we'll also talk a little bit more. So stay with us on the Martha Zoller Show. It is the Martha Zoller Show. I'm here with Dove Wilker, Linda Selig, and Anat Sultan Dadon. And it was a very hard day a couple of weeks ago when we found out for sure that the Bibas family had been murdered. And it was really hard to watch the headlines because there were people saying, died in captivity or whatever it was. And what I had prayed when it started to look like they weren't going to come back alive was that they had died early in the process and that they didn't suffer a long time. And it does appear that it was about a month into the process. But I also think, sadly, that at least for this generation, the two-state solution died with them. That's my opinion. I'm not asking you to make that opinion, but it's just, for me, it felt like that. So, Anat, where are we today in the war with Gaza or with Hamas? And, what are your thoughts now that we've had a transition in power here in the United States?
So we are in day 523. We have been since October 7th. And we have, you mentioned the Bibas family. It's important to remember that we have still 59 hostages still in captivity, many of them presumed alive.
And many entire families that were slaughtered. The Bibas family is the face of this, and I think it's because it's easy to relate to them, but there were many entire families that were slaughtered on that day.
Absolutely. We just saw recently one of the hostages who was released, for example, Eli Sharabi. Eli Sharabi emerged out of captivity after enduring hell and torture for so long to find that his wife and his 2 daughters had been murdered on that day. He did not know that all this time in captivity. And unfortunately, we see not only the heartbreak of October 7th, but we see how that is continuing for those who are still enduring captivity and for those who will have to begin healing and they don't feel like they can afford to start their healing process because they are so busy advocating for their brothers and sisters who are still in captivity. We currently are in negotiations. We know that the U.S. administration is heavily invested in these negotiations in an attempt to prolong the ceasefire in order for us to be able to see more hostages released. We have a negotiating team right now in Doha, Qatar. We hope to see our hostages return as quickly as possible. We are committed to that, and I have to commend and express appreciation to the U.S. administration for their commitment to seeing the hostages. We've seen very, very clear statements from President Trump, from the administration, and I think that is exactly what we need to see. This is not just Israel's responsibility. It is the responsibility of every member of the free world to see that this comes to an end, to see every single hostage returned. And that, unfortunately, is what we are still dealing with. Hopefully, we will see them all home soon. And we have to remember that it is not just the front with Gaza that we have. Yes, this is how it started on October 7th, but this has become really a war on 7 fronts. And we are having to address many different fronts, including, of course, the Iranian terror regime, the largest sponsor of terror in the world, who is sponsoring, funding, training, and guiding the many terror proxies in our region that are a threat to not only to Israel, but really to the stability of our region and to global stability.
So has the Syrian front kind of escalated since the fall of the regime, or has it stayed the same?
Well, we saw just this past weekend a horrendous massacre against the Alawite and the Christian minorities in Syria, thousands being massacred. We have not seen the demonstrations, by the way, condemning or expressing any sort of empathy to thousands of innocent civilians who have been slaughtered in Syria just these last few days. And we are very worried because, of course, that is another border that we have. And those in control right now in Syria are jihadi extremists who, of course, for them, Israel is an enemy, but all of us are the enemy.
So as you obviously represent Israel, but you've seen, the things that have happened on college campuses here and how Jewish students have been blocked and all of the things that are continuing to happen. What are your thoughts on that?
We have been, I think, observing, like many others, with a lot of concern, what we are seeing, because this goes far beyond really freedom of expression. And there's a very significant concern when you see the many demonstrators that are demonstrating for supposedly the values of life, freedom, and humanity, when what they are actually demonstrating for stands in stark opposition to all of those values. When they demonstrate in support of terror organizations, in support of terror, of murder, of rape, when they glorify Hamas, Hezbollah, the Houthis, it is not just of concern and should not just be of concern to Israel or to the Jewish community, but to the wider community. I give this as an example every time because people are really unaware of what it is that these demonstrators are aligning themselves with. When they are, for example, cheering on these terror organizations, including the Houthis in Yemen, the Houthi flag literally states on it, it has the words, "Death to Israel, death to America." These demonstrators out there are supporting those who seek to undermine America, American values. This extends far beyond Israel or the Jewish community. It really is about humanity, life, and freedom, and what we are aligning ourselves with. And when you see these demonstrators being praised by the Iranian terror regime, by the leaders of Hezbollah, of Hamas, that tells you all you need to know about what it is that they are actually siding with.
We will take a break, and when we come back, we're doing a little presentation, and then a big presentation, and then we are going to be talking more about the issues of the day. We'll be back. It is the Martha Zoller Show. That's Elise Stefanik, who's going to be our fabulous UN ambassador, who is going to stand up to the anti-Semites in the UN, I hope. I mean, I am just don't even get me started on the UN and the way they do things. But we are here with Dov Wilker, with Anat Sultan Dadon, and with Linda Selig. And Linda, you're here for a special purpose today, so I wanted to turn it over to you.
Well, thank you, Martha. And I have to say, it's a special privilege to be here. We have been looking forward to this day for a long time. And for your listeners, I just want to explain, and for you, really the history of the White Rose Society and what that's all about. So I have to take you back to World War II, to 1942. In Munich, a small group of Christian students, led by one student, a 19-year-old, Sophie Scholl, decided that they were going to fight the Nazis. And they were appalled by the anti-Semitism and the brutality of the regime. And they had no weapons. Their only weapons were their words. So this small group of maybe 7 students got together and did posters, they did leaflets, they wrote essays, and they signed it the White Rose. And they were known all over Germany, very, very famous throughout Germany, and they were started in 1942. By 1943, the 7 were captured and executed. But their moral courage and understanding of they had to stand up for what was right and what was moral is an inspiration to people to this day. They're Yad Vashem, they honor Sophie Scholl and the White Rose Movement. There's a museum to her in Munich, and many schools travel because they learn the story of the White Rose and Sophie Scholl. And when we used to think that, anti-Semitism, it was a terrible recurring sort of nightmare of the past of the Jewish people, and we would study it historically, but we didn't really feel it personally here. And on October 7th, our world was really shattered, and we were off balance, we were heartbroken, and we worried about the future for our Israeli brothers and sisters. But the next day, on every major campus, on the elite college campuses in cities around the world, the anti-Semitism and anti-Israel sentiment and really anti-America sentiment was shocking, absolutely shocking. And so as Jewish people, we have been very involved in what's called tikkun olam, to repair the world. And we have, for that reason, been a part of many social movements, many causes, and you'll always see Jewish names in all of in fighting for all the rights and all the other groups. And so we expected to hear a lot of support from people who we thought were our friends and allies, and yet there was almost a total silence, which made us feel completely isolated. And now we're in a situation where we're in America, and we worry about our children and grandchildren. Will there be a place for them in the future of America? And so out of all this darkness, we started to see some rays of hope. We saw some individuals who had the courage to stand up, to use their voice, to use their platform. And we said that we need to recognize these people who are standing with us, because you bring us so much encouragement that we are not alone, that we do have friends, and there are people that are standing with us proudly, loudly, and I have to say, no one more so than yourself. We are so thrilled to be here, and I just have to read to you. I'm going to present you with this rose, but I'd like to read for the audience what the card says, which is inside the box with the rose. And the card says, "We want to express our heartfelt gratitude for your support of the Jewish people during these challenging times. Your words and actions show your courage and your commitment to defending our shared values. You serve as a powerful example for others. With great appreciation, the White Rose Society." It's such a privilege to present this to you today.
Oh, Linda, thank you so much. Thank you. As I've told many people through this journey, and you're hearing me open this box, sometimes radio, you got to describe what you're doing. But it was the easiest decision I ever made, because it was so clearly a difference of right and wrong, okay? And here, is this beautiful card. You won't be able to see it, but we'll have video of it later. And then this beautiful white rose. Isn't that beautiful? Look at that. Looks very nice. Thank you. Thank you so much. It was the easiest decision I ever made, because it was right and wrong. And nobody could look at what happened, and there's no justification now that we know. I mean, I want to be as sympathetic to the Palestinian people as I can, but it's getting harder and harder for me when I hear the stories of the hostages about how people who were just civilians were the ones that were participating in their capture, in their torture. And I don't want to believe that every single Palestinian is bad, but there is a cultural difference. I remember talking to David Barak, I think I'm saying that right, from the IDF, and said, I'm a spokesperson for the IDF, so I really shouldn't have an opinion about this. But he said, I have 5 children, and I can tell you that my 5 children were not raised to hate Arabs, okay? But the children of Gaza have been raised to hate Jews. And that's going to take some time to work that out. And we've got to have hope for that. You mentioned, Anat, how could someone have hope after what they've been through? You have to. You have to have hope that things are going to be better.
Absolutely.
Because what's the point of going on if things aren't going to be better? And whether it's, financial crises or 9/11 or January 6th or October 7th, whatever it is, you have to accept what's happened, and then you've got to put one foot in front of the other and say, how can I help? What can I do with my resources? I'm a 65-year-old woman. I don't mind saying so.
I don't believe you're 65.
Yeah, thank you very much. My husband has taken very good care of me. And, it's what I could do. I did what I could do. And I encouraged other people to do what they could do.
Yeah. Martha, when I learned that you were going to be receiving the White Rose, it was really important for me to be here with you, because our friendship goes back so many years, and you've always been such a steadfast supporter of the Jewish community in Israel. And ever since, you've had me on the show multiple times to talk about what's going on with the hostages, what's going on in Israel. And knowing the reach and the impact that you have for the North Georgia community, but also through your whole nationwide network, right? You and I was in New York, and I ran into a friend of yours from Connecticut, I believe.
Yes.
Right? You have taken such responsibility to ensure that this message of the plight of the Israelis, the plight of American Jews, continues to be made aware to your audience, that it is really an honor to be here as you are receiving this important recognition that you don't do for the recognition. You do it because it's the right thing to do. And that's what even makes it more special for us. So thank you, Martha.
Thank you so much. You know, Linda, and anybody can answer on this, but I think Linda would be good. The thing I have the hardest time getting my head around, you know, and this was long before October 7th, is what are there, 14 million Jews in the world? 15 million Jews in the world. Not much of a difference than what it was. I don't think it's even to pre-World War II levels yet as far as the number of Jews. How is it that the Jews get blamed for everything? I don't understand. That's what I can't get my head around. I think it's the basic logic. I've always had, you know, my dad, if he were alive, God bless him, would tell you this. I've always had a problem with fairness from the time I was a little tyke all the way on. If something seemed unfair to me, I couldn't let it go. Okay, that's just the kind of person that I was. And so it just seemed so unfair to me from the earliest moment of me thinking about it that I don't really know that many Jewish people. How can Jewish people be at the center of every problem in the world? Does that, you know, does that ever occur to you?
You know,
or does that sound crazy to you?
There is a lot of people in the Jewish community will say that the Jewish community is the canary in the coal mine, meaning when things go bad for Jews, it's a bad sign for the society or whoever with the government. So it's the first sign, and Jews are sort of first on the list of the people that are hated, but America's right behind, you know, and Christianity and anything that's other. So we're in a, you know, I see this as we're in a fight together, that we have common values. We may worship differently, but we have common values, Western values, and I think they're worthy of total support.
Well, and unfortunately, I think things do go in cycles, and I think they sort of get just far enough away that there aren't enough people that still remember what something was, you know, and so that allows some of this stuff to breed again, whether it's economic cycles, but it also happens in these cultural cycles, too, where you get kind of far enough away from it that you forget, and then we make the same mistakes. Because, look, people are tribal. They tend to be tribal. You know, I jokingly, I had this wonderful uncle who lived to be 100 years old, who was an Armenian genocide survivor.
Wow.
His family was. They had escaped to India. So he was an Armenian that grew up in India, met my aunt from Lexington, South Carolina, and got married and brought a lot of shaking up to the family with this group of people. But he was very liberal, and he would explain that he was liberal because he had seen what happened when the masses rose up, because he had been in India during the revolution, and so you always want to appease the little guy, was his position. Then my brother was very libertarian, and I was very conservative. And so we'd be together for Thanksgiving, and we were the kind of family that still can talk about issues at holidays, but we always did that. We were always talking current events and all that stuff. And so we'd have a little debate about this or that or the other thing, and we'd always get into the Middle East. It would always end up with some discussion about the Middle East, and I would, before dinner, would end the discussion by saying, the Brits drew the lines, so it's their fault. We'll take a break, and then we'll take you up to the top of the hour. And Elise Stefanik is going to be a great friend to Israel. And it's the Martha Zoller Show. This is our final segment. But I want to just share one more thing that, like the day after October 7th, I put this little note in my calendar that I've kept every day that it reminds me when I go on the air. And it says, how are you any different than there are all good people on both sides people? And I wanted to put that in the forefront of my mind because there is not good people on all sides on this discussion. Okay, there might be good Palestinians, and I'm not talking about those folks. I'm talking about the people that aided in the hostage taking, went back afterwards on October 7th and continued the killing. I am talking about the people that will block Jewish students, will keep people, Jewish students being held in a room somewhere because it's not safe for them to go out into their classes that they paid for. So in certain areas, there are not good people on both sides. And I've reminded myself of that every day. So I want to just take a couple of minutes as we go up to the top of the hour. If there's anything that I've left out or you want to comment on, we'll start with Linda.
I do. Thank you, Martha. I did want to respond to something you said about would I save somebody. And I'm a part of a Christian Jewish women's group. And this question came up quite a bit. Would I save somebody? And my advice was, you don't have to worry about saving somebody. What you could do and what you should do is when you hear something that's wrong, that's prejudiced, that's hateful, stand up. And that's really what the White Rose Society is about. It's not so easy to do that. You're at a cocktail party, everything's fun and happy, and somebody makes an anti-Semitic comment. So what we hope is that people will have the courage to say, that isn't right, and call it out.
Yes.
And
you can do it in a tactful way, too.
Yes.
I mean, sometimes you don't have to be tactful, but you can do it in a tactful way because I think a lot of times people don't realize, and they don't realize what they're saying. And it might have been something they've heard their whole life, and they just don't know. And then you question them about it, and you ask them an open-ended question. We had a caller earlier in the program that said, you don't have to attack people, but ask them an open-ended question. Why do you think that? And then you can start a dialogue, and that's how we solve problems. That's for sure.
Right.
Yeah.
Dove, any final comments?
Yeah, I think it's important to remember, because you asked about the current administration with Anat, that it's important to express gratitude to our elected officials when they take actions that we support, and to let them know when they take actions that we don't support. And it's in particular at this moment. We need the administration. We are grateful for all that they are doing to address anti-Semitism, and we need to remember that we can't take that for granted, that there continue to be issues of anti-Semitism in the state of Georgia, in the Southeast, across the United States, and that our elected officials at the federal, the state, the county, and the local level, and in school boards need to take that seriously. We can't just allow the President of the United States to be the sole spokesperson for combating and disrupting anti-Semitism. We need to make sure that all levels of government are taking it seriously.
You're absolutely right. And, not to be too political here, but when a couple of months ago, our own Senator Ossoff, who I have a very good relationship with. I'm a Republican. He's a Democrat. We have a good relationship. He took a vote that I could not believe on the floor of the Senate, where it was like not even a close vote. It wouldn't even mattered if he voted or not. There were only 18 senators that voted the way he did, and thankfully he wasn't successful in blocking arms to Israel because 81 senators voted in favor of the movement. But I couldn't understand, as a Jewish man from Atlanta, how he could make that vote. Yeah. And so I talked to him about it. He didn't like it. He didn't agree with me. He had all his reasons why, because he's a very thoughtful guy. But I just said, it's the wrong thing. Yeah. It's the wrong thing to do. Israel has been, maybe Israel and the UK are probably our two best allies. Yep. Even though sometimes we say things to each other that we don't like, they are our two best allies. And we should support them. Not no matter what, but almost no matter what. Almost no matter what. Not. Any final comments?
I agree with regards to the support, but I think it's important to understand that supporting Israel, it's not just about supporting Israel. It's really about supporting America and what America stands for. It's about supporting the free world. It's about supporting the values that we all believe in. And there have been several suggestions in this conversation about what one can do. And I would like to add to that, I would urge anyone who can to travel to Israel, to visit Israel. There is so much conversation going on about Israel. This is the time to visit Israel, to experience it firsthand, to engage with Israelis, to visit the southern border, to understand what it is that Israel went through, what it is that we still are going through, that our society is going through, what are the challenges that we face. And I think that can really equip one with a better understanding of what it is that Israel is about, but also what it is that we are fighting for. And I think that would go a long way also in the message to Israelis on the ground, because it has been a tough year and a half. And it's really important for us to see our friends, not just from afar, but coming also to support us on the ground and to learn more about what it is that this moment in time is about, because this is a moment in time that we will all be looking back on years from now. And taking a stand, just like you are role modeling, will count not only today, but for years to come.
Well, and I think that we have so many challenges in the world, but you're right about you being kind of like the Western Wall, if you will, to protect, the Western world.
Right.
And I think it's so important that we do that. And, I find it difficult at times, not this issue, but difficult to hear what people say. But I do find some comfort in that, if you scroll through, and I try not to doom scroll any more than I have to, but you scroll through and you look at videos of protests, the protests that are anti-Israel are always angry and mad, and their face is covered, and nobody wants to know who they are. And you see these other, like the big one you went to in Washington right after October 7th. But there's lots of other ones where there were young people that went to New York and filled the streets with 4,000 or 5,000 young people, and they were singing and they were happy, and you just kind of look at the difference, and you got to see that there is a difference there in what they're fighting for. And I would just say to folks that I know that many people think, what can I do? What can I do? But you can do something. If there's something you believe in, you can do something. And I'll close with this that I tell you every day. I think people need to vote. They need to parent their children. And then they need to have a face-to-face conversation with somebody that they haven't talked to before. If we do that, then we'll get back on the right track. Thank you all for being here today. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I'll be back tomorrow because we're always here, always local.